Okay. Good evening again, everyone. Thanks for joining IET webinar, technical webinar on BIM use and project team competency requirement for BIM project execution. My name is Joanne, the chairlady of IET management section and the host of today's webinar. This webinar will introduce you to the latest Hong Kong government policy on the BIM technology adoption and a brief introduction to the CIC BIM standards. Here, I would like to introduce our speaker, David Fong. He has over 26 years of architectural experience in Australia and Hong Kong. He has been using BIM technology for 21 years and applied this state-of-the-art technology to the building design, documentation and coordination, construction and facility management, establishing the most efficient way of working practice. David is the past chairman of the Hong Kong Institute of Building Information Modeling, promoting BIM in Hong Kong. He was a member of the Hong Kong Government CAS Standards for Works Project Working Committee, Hong Kong IA IT Committee, Hong Kong IA Board of Practice, and the past chairman of Autodesk Industry Advisory Board. He was the head of the BIM department in IDIS for 6 years. David is currently working on different BIM statutory submission standards for Housing Department, Architectural Service Department, and Buildings Department. He is one of the authors of the CIC BIM standards. Now, I would like to pass time to David. Well, I'm sorry, hold on. I would like to remind everyone that if you have any question during the presentation, you can put your question in the chat box. That is, you can see the Q&A there. You can simply put your question here, and we will answer your question after the presentation. The presentation will take 15 minutes, and 10 minutes will be reserved for the Q&A sections. So now, David, it's your time.
Okay, thank you. Would you mind to let me share my screen? Yeah. Okay. Right. Share the screen. Right. Okay. You can see my screen, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Joanne. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this short technical seminar. And thank you for the introduction. My name is David Fong, and I'm an architect by profession. And I'm going to take you through to a short presentation on the which covered the following 3 areas, and on the government policy from the Development Bureau on the BIM technology, and secondly on the introduction of the BIM standards general, which is actually I was the key author of this document, and thirdly on the team members' competency requirement. Right now, this is not actually 3 topics, really on one topic, and it will be interplayed among different areas. Right. Okay. Without further ado, okay, let me just share the presentation materials. Now, BIM, it is no longer a new technology, I would say, right? Because personally, I've been using BIM actually since 1998, so it's 24 years now, is my personal experience. Now, for the last few years, and it has been a very robust promotion from the government policy point of view to promote BIM as a technology to the industry. Now, if we go to Google and search on the BIM, and you find that in Hong Kong, it always prompts us to a document, which is this one here. Now, to start with, I will taking through on the policy side and then on the standard side, and how these 2 main components is going to affect the industry in Hong Kong. Now, being a professional architect and also being a BIM consultant right now, it does have a significant impact on the way how we do our projects, how we shape our city, all right, in terms of all these documents. Now, in on the screen, right, you see right now, it is a latest version of the government policy. It is derived from the Hong Kong government by the Development Bureau, and it is the technical circular is on the adoption of BIM for capital works. Now, you can see that this is the latest one, and in fact, it was effective in January last month. This important document, we call this a BIM mandate. All right. When we talk about the policy in BIM, we always refer to this most important document. Now, before I talk into this one here, let me take you through the very first version of this. Now, the one you just see, it was the latest one, but for the first time, it was published in December 2017, and it was effective in January 1st of 2018. So among the community we're talking about here, we always say that Hong Kong has been BIM mandate since 2018. All right. Now, just a very quick going through the important point of this policy. Now, the very first information is saying that now any capital works more than Hong Kong $30 million shall use BIM technology. Now, what is $30 million? In Hong Kong, we said there's a cutoff point five years ago. Whenever we call it minor work, which means we do not require the government for approval, and that's small thing that's below $30 million. Anything more than that will be subject to the BIM requirement. Now, I will come back to that later on. But for this very first one, technical circular, the most important point in here, we come up with a so-called a BIM use table. All right. Now, just to have a quick look. Now we have a BIM use table from BIM use number 1 to BIM use number 20. Okay, and it covers the area on the feasibility studies, planning, design, and construction. And in fact, it actually hints on the operation side as well. Now, without looking into the details, may I just request you to look at the numbers in here. The numbers of O, optional items, versus the number for M, mandatory items, right? So you can see that back in 2018, the number of mandatory items is relatively, small numbers, right? Now, 1 to 20 BIM users. Now, if I come back and compare with the one we just got, the latest one, all right. Now, what has changed throughout the years? As a matter of fact, every December of a year, there is a new version of this policy coming out. Now, the very first thing that we see is that the 30 million benchmark has not been changed. All right. So it always states that any building and any construction more than 30 million shall use BIM technology. Now, but what does it cover? It covers the capital works projects. That means all the fundings, if the project funding is coming from the government, they are all subject to this. So when we talk about the roads, the tunnels, and those civil works, buildings coming from by the government, they are subject to this. Secondly, it's called the entrustment works. So a project for the airport, a project from the underground, the railway system, they are the project entrusted by the government to ask these specialists to build the airport, to build the MTR, for example. Now, those are called entrustment works. Subvented capital works projects, if I don't misunderstand that correctly, now it refers to the funding is subsidized by the government, but to an organization that carry out their own project. So those projects belongs to that organization, but the funding is actually coming from the government. Now, and also the fourth one, if there's any work undertaken by the private parties, but those part will be handed back for the government for maintenance, is also subject to this policy. Say, for example, we have a private developer, they develop their own residential tower, but there's a park there there's a tunnel or there's a footbridge that will be handing back to the government for the maintenance. Those area and also more than 30 million will be subject to under this. So what it really means, it covers most of the work in Hong Kong, apart from the very, very last wholly private sector. That's the only sector that's not being covered by this. Now, if we search for a little bit more definition on the project and trusted organization, that includes airport authority, MTR, private developers. So it will really have a wide coverage on the adoption of BIM. All right, so that is one important message. It has a wide coverage. Now, secondly, if we look at the BIM use table I just mentioned, now we look at the number of BIM users covered from 1 to 20. It has not changed. It's still, for the last 5 years, it has always been 20. And also cover the planning stage, design stage, and construction stage. However, if you remember the number of M versus number of O, it is a significant increase from the optional items to the mandatory items in here. So this one is going to be, is already implemented since January, and you can see that most of the items here are being mandated to be mandatory to use BIM. So this is a huge implications throughout the year. So you can imagine in every December each year, there will be from a lot of optional becomes a few optional. Every year there's a gradual implementation towards the BIM adoption. Okay, so this is another important message to the industry. Now let's take a look on the a little bit more details on the BIM use. What does the industry, what does the policy say? How we are going to use BIM, for example? Okay, now when you say BIM technology, definitely we are talking about the 3D models. We talk about the different disciplines. Now, I actually would like to illustrate to you in a real kind of examples and how that that's related to the policy. Now, you see on the screen here, I'm using a CDE, Common Data Environment, which is, I will explain a little bit more later on. I'm using an online system to demonstrate to you. Now, it covers stages, planning stage, design stage, construction stage, and operating stage. All right. So the policies talk about the various stages, the different stages in here. So planning stage, design stage, construction stage. In fact, if you look at the wording here, asset management, is talking about the operation phase, maintenance schedule, operation phase. So it is very, very obvious that we have all these different phases. Secondly, when we talk about the BIM model, the BIM technology, it is not only on one discipline. It covers many different, all the stakeholders, including the architecture, the structural engineer, the MEP engineer, the civil engineer, all the stakeholders basically in the industry. So what that really means, they have to use this technology on their design work. Now, if we come back on the very first use in here, we will see that the very first item is called the design authoring, which is in the planning stage, design stage, and construction stage. It is mandatory. Now, being an architect myself, all right, I do the design work. Sometimes I do the planning work, and also I administer the contract. I create the drawings for the I create a drawing for the government to approve it. I also create the drawings for the tender for the contractor to build it, so it affect the construction. Now, the policy say that any design author, whoever get involved in the design must use BIM for design. So in that case, in here, you will see that we are having the architectural model we're having the structure model, we have the MEP model, we have the landscape model, we have the civil model, whatever. So that affects every designer in the market. Now, likewise for the construction, during the construction in here, so the contractor, whoever need to get involved on the design side, so they need to design the temp work, they need to design the shop drawing, the coordination. Now, so they have the builder models, they have the structure model, they have the MEP model, whatever. So we are talking about the design phase. We have a design kind of model. We have construction kind of model in here. Now, the next item we're talking about here, if we have the various design models, we need to sit together and talk about this. We all know that design will not come to the a finalized version on day one. It is a process. So we need to go through the design reviews. Now, design reviews, it applies in the planning stage, design stage, and also construction stage. Now, if you think about this, what is design review? Design, how are we going to do the design reviews? So we have the drawings, we do the markup, we do redlining and that kind of thing. And we use a red pen, we use a PDF, we translate PDF. Now, these are all fine, but those are not the BIM process. Now we need to decide, we have the design review, which is mandatory. Okay, so that how are we going to facilitate the overall review there? Now, if I come back to the process, since, okay, let me just say I'm in the design phase, I'm going to have some sort of design review. Now, let me just demonstrate by using some exercise. And so we have the architectural design, and then we will have the structural design, and we'll have the MEP design, for example. We need to put them together so that we know what's happening there. Okay, now we can see I'm looking at an architectural model. Now let me call upon a structural model. Okay, we'll call upon the design from the structural engineer, and okay, I would like to see the design from the E&M or MEP engineer. So instead of calling up the whole model, okay, probably I select on the 13th floor the MEP in here. Okay, let's take a look. Now, I just call up the different design model from different designers. Now, they compose together and form a federated model in here. So when we put all the different design input together, that will form, we can see problems, we can see issues. All right, so we need to talk among ourselves. What we are doing right here now, we are doing the coordination among different disciplines. We need to talk and we need to review the information. How are we going to communicate? So let me show you. There's a list in here. I have many tag, some tag in here. If I click on a certain tag, it shows me where it is and show me, okay, I got a problem somewhere in here before, not enough headroom. We need that kind of thing, 2.5 meters headroom. Now, this is an issue that we find when we have all these components together, and we need to communicate the issue to the stakeholder. So you can see that, all right, so that issue, the headroom issue, is going to sent to a certain person, by whom, to whom, and where that is, and what is the issue, is a headroom issue, what's the priority, what the status, and what sort of deadline I'm going to have the other people to resolve that. Now, all these, it is a workflow that's happening during the coordination and review process. We need to record them, we need to trace them, we need to follow up. Okay, you can see that, okay, now here we got, I give them a deadline of 10 days, so it becomes red. But on the other issue, someone, okay, have a record of minus 27 days or minus 106 days, whatever. Now, this is only a sample, right? It's not real. So that's why someone is not dealing with it. Now, so we are going to have a communication platform. We need to communicate among the different stakeholders. In this case, the information, it is passing from one parties to another, and that facilitate all these design issues, construction issues as well. The same methodology applied. In fact, what we have been doing is actually we are doing the 3D coordination, which is, you can see that, which is mandatory. So we are expecting the designers not only doing their own design, but has come together as a holistic platform so that we can exchange our design criteria and do the design review. Now, with this, what you have just seen is the architectural model, structural model. But what about the existing site? What about the roads, the topography? Now, so that means even the existing site condition is also expected to be mandatory. Okay, we need to not only model our design, but what about the existing condition? Now, once we have this design model we have all these condition model, we can do some sort of analysis. All right, we come to the what is the most valuable value of that site, and how are we going to handle the wind, the sunlight, those kind of things. So again, it is mandatory. So it's mandatory in terms of planning and in terms of design. Now the BIM is not only to the designers, but also from the planner. In this case, when we talk about the planning, so it involves not only one building, but also involve the building from neighborhoods, right? From the other surroundings. So so that is on the site analysis. Now, from here, from number 1 to 5 in here is talking more from the designer point of view. How the geometry change in accordance to the brief whatsoever. Now, when we talk about cost, so we know about we need to produce drawing for the QS to take on board, right? For the QS to take on board, so they need to do the quantity takeoff of a certain material on a volume of concrete, the amount of paint, that kind of mathematical calculation. And at the end of the day, in design stage, they need to come up with a bills of quantity, the BQ, right? So we understand that process. But here, since the design is now in BIM, using the BIM model, so you can see that now on number 6 in here, the job done by QS to help them to do the cost estimation. Since BIM is actually coming up with all this quantity, so it's not a surprise for the government to say that, okay, since we now have all these objects, and each of the object will come up with its own properties, right? So we have all these properties. We have the quantity. If I select a door, is the door the size of the door, the material of the door. If you click on the wall, the volume of the wall, the concrete, the surface of the wall. Now these are the quantity that embed into the BIM model, and so that is used to facilitate the QS to do the cost estimation. Now, likewise, during the construction phase, because the construction model also have all these specification. Now, it facilitates the contractor to actually buy in procure the material, to check on the amount of money that need to be spent on procurement, and also getting the payment from the consultant to certify the consultant. Now, all these process now is under the cost estimation, which is now mandatory. Okay, now here comes to a very, very debatable argument in here. Once this policy is done, the thing is, we know that cost is important. Definitely, cost is important for the project. Now, should anything happen if a QS measuring a project and come up with an amount,
And what if something wrong with the amount? Then a lot of implication if the amount is not accurate, right? Now here comes the argument. The argument is now because of the BIM in here, the BIM model is coming or made by the designer, by the design author. Now because of the design author, so the QS is using the model to measure the quantity and then to come up with the cost. The problem being if there's any inaccuracy with the model itself. Now, if there's inaccuracy in the model itself, then obviously there will be inaccuracy in the cost at the end. The problem being is whose responsibility is that? Is it due to the author or is it due to the quantity surveyor? Now, it is very hard to say. Now, I personally, I think both will have the responsibility, but where does the line drawn? Okay, now it actually gives us a lot of challenge in terms of the professional liability. Now, with the introduction of BIM here, so who is taking more liability on this? Now, I don't know. I don't have the answer for that, and that demands the sitting down of the different traditional professional to define how it is going to be measured. Now, that is on the cost estimation. Now, engineering analysis, so mandatory. We have to do the structural calculations. We need to do acoustic. We need to do a lot of analysis in here. So engineering analysis, again, is mandatory to use the BIM model for analysis. Now, in fact, that will help us to since we got a 3D model, so we got a 3D model, and how the structural model can be talked to the structure calculation software, and to facilitate this. Now, again, this is mandatory. Okay, the next item here is talking about the energy analysis now, which is optional still at the moment in the design stage and the construction stage. So how much energy is being consumed versus how much energy can be saved. This kind of analysis, it happens in design stage and also need to verify after the construction. Now, this is optional at the moment. All right, the next one here, sustainability evaluation. Well, we know the system like BIM Plus and maybe in US, we have the LEED system to calculate what sort of a sustainability measures can be received from the BIM model. Now, this evaluation, it is mandatory. Now, with the BIM Plus, for example, in Hong Kong situation, the BIM Plus, and we have scoring system. In this case, the scoring from the BIM model, the use of material, the arrangement, and we got bonus mark in the evaluation system if a project is being used, the BIM is being used. All right, so that is again mandatory here. Okay, next one, this is more related to us as an architect, space programming. Space programming referring to the what is needed for a project. So how many rooms there, and what is the use of those rooms, and we can see that you can come up with different schedules, different how many rooms, how many floors, how many space. Now that is from the design requirement, but the design work done in here, does it comply with the client's requirement? So that must be a comparison in the process. So the use of BIM here. So we have the BIM as a model. We extract the information from the model and compare with the client requirement. So that is on the spatial programming here. Again, it is mandatory. So how and as an architect, we keep on changing our design. How can we adapt all these changing significantly or efficient enough? Now, so that is the use by means of the use of BIM, and I'm not sure I can show you right here. Probably for this project, cannot. Now, so there are different functionalities to extract the information in terms of space relationship. Okay, so the live session. Okay, all right. Now, let's go to the next one. So after the space, now this come to the 4D modeling. Talking about the phase planning, you can see that it's also under design stage mandatory and also construction mandatory. Now, when we talk about 4D modeling mandatory, it makes sense. It makes sense for the contractor because we need to understand the construction sequence, how the building is built, and from there we can see the timeline and probably let me show you the example. Okay, let me show you the very classical so-called the 4D modeling. Okay. So we have the site, we have the model, and you can see that we have a timeline underlined here, and what we're looking at here, and how the different construction components are being, say the concrete thing is from the left-hand side, right-hand side, and just like that. Now it will becomes a video just for people to look at. And so that we know what should come first, what should come last, and throughout the playing of this sequence, we can understand is there any technical difficulty somewhere, and before it happens, we sort this out. Now, I think most of the BIMers understand the value of this process. Now, however, when we talk about this 4D, it is not only on the construction, it is now is on the design phase as well. To start with, how come we as a designer, how can we determine the 4D modeling without understanding the construction, the sequence? Because for the construction, every contractor may have their own proposal, but how come in the designer we need that? Now, in fact, there's a definition in here. So it is mandatory for the construction activities with high or to extreme risk. Okay, now there's in the government project, so they have all this risk assessment. If a project being assessed and come up with a conclusion that project, it is subject to pretty high risk, and those projects, then we need to do a 4D modeling. Okay, now we have come across a project, a bridge project, for example. Now, for those people in Hong Kong, we know the Trunk Road Route number 3, 3號幹線, all right? That ferry expressway. Now, there was a bridge near Nam Cheong Station that spanned across the whole very, very wide road in Hong Kong. Now, that bridge, that project here was actually constructed with the bridge constructed vertically instead of horizontally. We know the bridge will be horizontal at the end of the day. Now, but it constructed vertically, and on one night switch over, the two part of the bridge actually just come down and merge and connect in the middle. Now, that was a very, very high risk project that only stops the traffic only on one night. So that construction is a very, very risky project, and so it is mandatory to program that in the as a mandatory requirement. All right. So the next one is on the digital fabrication. Now you can see that it's mandatory in the design, mandatory in the construction. It is called on the digital fabrication. The MIC, modular integrated unit, or DFMA, design for manufacturing assembly. Now it's now highly promoted by the Hong Kong government. Now, in order to have this prefabricated unit, so the fundamental is we have to use BIM. Okay, use the BIM software to design those components and then get it manufactured. So mandatory. Now you can see that from here to right from number 1 to number 12, it is talking about the design phase got involved. Now from here, we start to talk about the site. So this is on the construction area, right? So site utilization planning. So you have just seen that in the on the 4D presentation, how do we integrate all the different components together? Where's the tower crane? Where's the material? What's the best use of the space? Now that is again mandatory on the site utilization. 3D control and planning. So the sites need to set up. We have the BIM model. So how this setting up to be controlled from the BIM model, again, mandatory. As-built modeling, simple, or it's been required as mandatory. Okay, so the contractor need to produce all this information from the for the as-built, mandatory. Now, we may come to a little bit more details on that as-built. Now, project system analysis, another BIM use, which is optional. So what does it mean? Project system analysis. Okay, so we know that the design is done by the designer, which is mandatory. That means during the design stage, there's design parameters. The system parameters need to be defined in the design. But are those design criteria being met? So especially on the MEP side, so whether an equipment is actually performing or fulfilling the requirement as defined in here. All right. Now, so we need to do the analysis on the as-built versus the plan or versus the design. So again, in here, we need to check and we need to record the performance of a certain system and put it back into the BIM model so that we have a record of all these analysis during the handover stages. Now, so that is optional, not yet mandatory. The next one here, maintenance schedule. Now, again, it's quite a little bit difficult to understand what is maintenance scheduling here, which is mandatory. Now, let me give you an example. A designer designed a plant room. All right, inside the plant room, there's a certain equipment. Now, say a pump inside a pump room. Now, the contractor is actually building the pump in accordance to the design specification. They find a product which is a pump, and a pump is supplied by a supplier. Come with the catalog, come with the installation manual, come with the operation manual. Now, that kind of thing, that's okay. Now, but as long as the building is built, finished, now, and it moves into operation, so in just maybe in 2 months' time, so the pump room is flooded with water. So what happened there? What happened there? Why is that after completion is flooded with water? And they try to find out, they find out that now the supply of the pump actually come with a manual, and the manual says, okay, every month you need to clear the pump doing certain procedures. Now, because the operation didn't actually follow the instruction, and then so the pump is blocked, and that's why we got a flooding, and that's that kind of event. Now, the thing is, the maintenance scheduling of a certain equipment need to be attached to a BIM model, so that in the operation, when we have a screening of all these items there, we know which item we need to maintain in accordance to a certain schedule. All right, so that sort of information now is being required from the BIM use. All right, so on the maintenance scheduling. Now, number 18 here, space management. Now, since we have done this space programming, which is on the design stage, when it is done, that means, say we have 100. We need to have 100 classroom. Okay, now at the end of the day, we have the in the a spill model, we have 100 classroom. Now, how is those classroom being used? So we need to provide the lighting, we need to provide the air conditioning. Certain lab classroom is available on a certain day, certain time, and then in the next hour, a certain class is going to attend that classroom. Now, those kind of space management issue and tracking, how are we going to make use of the BIM model to help us to facilitate those kind of management? Okay, now it's optional at the moment. All right. Now, number 19 on the asset management. Now, the asset management now is being mandatory. So that mandatory is for the contractor on the construction phase, right? Now, it is mandatory on the asset management. Now, if you look at in the as-built modeling, which is already asking the contractor to build a model, to submit the model on the as-built, and then the as-built is being used by the operation on asset management. Now, this again has a huge implication. Now, let me show you a standard. Okay, let me show you a standard which is actually required how it is set in terms of the standard. Let me show you. Now, I'm showing you here on one of the standard, not the CIC one, but very famous one from the ASD. Now, this is the Architectural Service Department on a standard called the Facility Upkeep. All right, BIM guide for facility upkeep. Now, because the government on the ASD on this department PSB, they are going to maintaining the asset, which if in here it is now being requested. Asset management is mandatory. Now, for this department here, they're maintaining over 8,000 government assets, government buildings. So now all these buildings are being designed in BIM and being constructed using BIM. Now, after the construction, it's passed to the operator for them to maintain it. So it says in here, before you pass me the as-built BIM model, the BIM model must contain a certain elements. Now, let me show you. It says in the as-built model, okay, they must have a standard information, standard parameters inside that model. So, requirement number one. So the model must have a parameters called location code. Now it is in 13 characters. Now it should be in here, something like this. Now this is number one. Okay, number 6 requirement, number 15 requirement, 23, 31, 40, 46 requirements. Now, what does it really mean? What does it really mean in here? So in asset management, so they require 46 information from the as-built modeling. So the contractor, the main contractor, need to give back to the client with a as-built model with all this information. Now, okay, they give you an example. Give a door. One door in the model, this model here, they must have these 46 parameters. Have a window must have this location code, must have this information. So you can imagine every single object, it come up with a huge list of information needed. And how many windows in a building? How many doors in a building? If you have 1,000 windows, you have 1,000 times 46 information that the contractor need to input in. So it got a huge implication in terms of asset management here, and in terms of the as-built modeling. So the amount of effort, amount of time, amount of resources to input this information into the BIM model is quite phenomenal. Now, I'm just quoting the example from the ASD is on the door and also on the window, right? Let me show you another requirement, another standard. So this standard is coming from another government department. It's coming from the EMSD. okay, electrical and mechanical services department on the MEP side. You can see that the BIM for the asset management standard and guidelines. Now it's been published for, since I think it's 2017 for the version 1. So it's been several years. Now, what does it say? What does it say in here? So with the as-built model, the contractor need to name every single asset with a certain code. So they have all this code to follow. So give you an example. So you have a equipment. Okay, that equipment will have this coding. Now, and then all this coding have got a certain naming convention. All this coding, they should have certain unit. Okay, so unit is standardized. All these, they have certain standardized symbols, standardized. Okay, this system, how it names, standardized coloring. All right, with all this coloring. And more importantly, if you scroll down in this standard here, so one equipment have this code, as this code has a function, location, relationship, ID, tag number. You can see this is required. So if you count the number here, it come up with 40, I think 48 or something. Needed 50 information per object. So you can imagine how many lights in a building, how many power points, how many switches, how many equipment in a building. And now the government is actually asking for, so we need to have all this information to maintain our system. Use BIM for asset management, which is mandatory. Now, as a contractor, please, you need to input all this information into the system so that we can run it. So you can imagine the amount of time, amount of effort in there. Now, okay. Wow, I'm looking at the time, it's a bit overrun. Now, with all this, the most important one here, drawing production, mandatory. Now, to me, it is the most important implication from this. So after the design, after after all this, our contract, our legal document, they are in drawings, whereby all these drawings now required to be produced using BIM. Now, imagine all the submission drawing we produce, all the tender drawing we produce, it is now required in using BIM. So designers, contractors, this combined services drawing, all the shop drawing, any of the drawing are need to be produced by BIM. Now, this is a very, very harsh requirement, really. Now, having said that, let me show you another standard. For example, the CIC standard. Let me show you MEP standard. Now, over the years, all these standards is now actually done. I would say done. So you can see that this is the MEP standard for study submission. Inside here, they have all these requirement, and let me show you. Let me show you actually on the content page. Since we're talking about standard now, look at the production drawing for water, for drainage, for fire surfaces, for energy efficiency, for electrical, for the gas, for the generator, for the freshwater cooling tower, for the lift and escalator, for the transformer room, for the switch room, for the telecommunication. Now, basically everything. So just take a look on the sample. You can actually download from the web page here. Now you can see that the generation of information, generation of drawings from BIM. Okay, now you can take a look at this sample. Now, all you see here, all these drawings, okay, all these drawings are actually produced by BIM software, by BIM. Now, no longer CAD, no longer CAD drawings. Now, all you see here, it is from BIM. Now, if you come back to this technical circular, the policy on this item here, if you now look at number 26, so it says that the industry are used to use CAD to produce drawings. Now, but for BIM projects, now the 2D drawing shall be generated from the 3D model. So we must have the model first, and then we generate the drawings. Now, works department, and they engage the consultants, that means the designers, architects, engineers, contractors, the main contractors, subcontractors. What did they use? Seize production drawing by other platform. Now, no more CAD drawings. So all the drawings need to be coming from the BIM. So this is a very, very strong statement in here to cease production drawing. So what that means in the BIM use table, so the drawings, the design from the BIM, coordination from BIM, the drawing is from BIM, the course is from BIM, right? Okay, all this, what I just described are mandatory. Okay, so you can see the significance in here. Now, in terms of policy, I think it's quite a lot. Now, come to the next items on the CIC standard. So when we talk about all this product or all this policy, nevertheless, we need to come up with to follow a certain standard. Now, let me just do a very quick introduction on this large document here. Because of time, I don't go into all these details on the history. But now this is an important standard that come along. Okay, showing you this called the CIC BIM Standard General, and already up to 2.1 version. Okay, now the main point about this is it is tally with the ISO standard 19650, which is international standard covering the BIM production. Now, without going into all this detail, the important thing is it is ISO standard. Now, I would overrun a little bit. Okay, so
all right. Okay.
all right, a little bit. Let's see the main thing. Now, the main thing, okay, you can see the BIM use. Actually, it is more than the policy. It's 26 BIM uses. Now, the other thing I want to show you, this standard here, it covers, okay, one very important aspect. Sorry, let me showing you this one here. Now, it covers the planning, design, construction, operation, right? And also, take a look on this. So the standard general tally with the ISO standard. The standard, it covers contractual areas, statutory areas, and practice areas. So as a designer, now we need to do statutory submission. So in the buildings department in Hong Kong, they actually publish the using BIM to do the general building plan submission. That's on the architecture side. Now on the structure side, you can see this. Under the publication, we have standards for superstructure, for curtain wall, for foundation, for demolition, for hoarding, for excavation and natural support, for site formation, for GI ground investigation, for the drainage. That is for the structural side. For the MEP side, I just mentioned to you with that standard. Now, basically, it says for the architecture, structure, and MEP production of statutory drawings, we have standards, CIC standards. For this one here, contracts. So EIR is a jargon. So in here, BIM specification. Specification for design phase, planning phase, specification for construction phase, all published. Then we talk about the contract. The contract side, so this special condition contract, how to exercise the BIM contract within the main contract. Now we have this standard. For the engagement of BIM service, how to engage a consultant to do the BIM service. So it is a BIM service agreement standard, all published. Now, there's some good practice or better practice. So that's industry practice. Okay, when you say BIM, it's always start from BIM object. So the production of BIM object standards published. Standard for the architectural structural engineering standards on BIM published. Standard for the MEP, how to have a good practice for MEP published. Standard for underground utility published. For AMFM case study published. Now you can see that over the last couple of years, all the area on the drawing side, on the submission side, on the contract side, on the specification side, on the practice side, everything published basically. So it is a whole collection of standards available. Of course, we don't have the time to go through each one of these, all right? There's a whole lot of policy and standard. Now, who is going to execute it? Okay, let me show you. Who is going to execute all these standard? Okay, just one more slide in here. BIM managers. All right, BIM managers. So in here, you're talking about the traditional contract. We have the client side, we have the design side, we have the construction side, and then we have the operation side. Now with this standard, you can see that there's a guy called BIM auditor from the client side who has to make the decision to facilitate the design side need to have a BIM process. So during the design phase, there's a BIM manager that overlooking the multidisciplinary interaction. So the architect, the structural engineer, the MEP, they have their own discipline lead. They have the BIM coordinator. They have the BIM model to model it. So we have the architecture model, structural model, MEP model, civil model, other discipline model. Now you have this BIM manager to manage the cross-discipline phases. Now we come to this construction phase. In the construction phase, so we have the tray one, we have the concreting work, we have the steel work, we have the curtain wall work. Now then we have the BIM manager in the construction phase to cater for this. So every single trade they have the coordinator and have the modeler in here. Now the contractor need to submit for the consultant to approve their submission. So that's why we have this BIM manager to overseeing this. Now at the end of the construction, so the information need to pass to the operation phase. So in this phase here, who is going to approve this? Again, the BIM manager in here. So prepared by the contractor, but also approved by the this BIM manager. Now, and the facility management here, how are they going to use the information for the facility management? So with the help of that client side BIM auditor, so we'll help them to carry out all this. Now, you keep on hearing me saying that this BIM manager, BIM coordinator, BIM modeler. Now, this kind of post, right? This kind of competency. Now, what is a BIM manager? Who can be a BIM manager? Who can be a BIM coordinator? Now this on the standard side. Now let's go back to this technical circular. Okay. Now let's take a look on the CBM. Now take a look. It actually specifies in terms of under policy. It says that every project need to be over 30 million. We need a BIM application. Now on each one of these, we need to have a BIM team. So we need to establish a BIM team, and the BIM team shall be sufficient and technical competent resources to do the job. So it's led by a team leader. Now, look, in terms of policy, we now have definitions. So the BIM team leader need to be a CIC certified BIM manager. It's so-called the CIC BIM. So effective from July. So any project need to have led by BIM manager, and that BIM manager need to be a CIC BIM. Now, if you look at this one here, so we need on the client side, we need to have one BIM manager. We need to have the number 2 BIM manager for the design side. We have the number 3, the BIM manager for the contractor side. Probably we'll have the BIM manager for the operation side as well. Now, all these roles in here, as defined, they need to be a CIC BIM from 1st of July. Okay, so, and then for the BIM coordinator, so they have listed out the 3 years requirement. 1 year need to have a BIM project, and from the policies, you can see that in here, starting from the July of 1st this year. So they need to be they shall complete CIC accredited BIM coordinator course or CIC certified BIM coordinator. Now we have another requirement in here. So if you look at the old chart in here, so how many BIM coordinators? So each discipline, they should have their own coordinator, right? So one project will have, I don't know how many BIM coordinator, and each one of these need to be a CCBC. Now again, I don't have the we don't have the time to go into details on what is CCBC, what is CCBM. But in terms of policy, you now know that now it's been defined in Hong Kong sector. So all of a sudden, the requirement of the BIM becomes so significant, and they need to complete the BIM courses. All right, CCBM as well in BIM courses. Now, 2 more highlights, very short, on this policy. For the first time, this term CDE appeared. Now, CDE is not a new word, but the new word is now being appear in the technical circular. So every project, every BIM project, they need to use CDE. Okay, so the one I've been showing you with all these collaboration and all these online collaboration, they are already in the CDE online with all these kind of things. So in a cloud platform, they need to take up all these different model and collaborate and review in CDE. So you can see that now it's now mandatory. So it says that the requirement of CDE, they involve review the project data requirement, number 1, data exchange workflow, number 2, and how to manage the management strategy, number 3. So the making up of CDE to deal with all these. Now, for the first time, they have this word here, departmental CDE. Is the CDE going to be a per project base or per contract base? No. Now we need to facilitate the establishment per department base. So it's a one department, they have their one CDE, and they take care of hundreds of contracts, tens of projects within that CDE. Now, and then because CDE is a collection of all this information in one platform. So, but different departments may have different platforms. So we come to the development of standards for information exchange among, another keyword, interdepartmental CDE, another new word in here. So now this is pretty demanding. Now, what is departmental CDE? What is interdepartmental CDE from a policy point of view? Now, so that will be a new establishment. Okay, the very last requirement in terms of policy I want to show you. Now, even though we say that,
I'm so sorry that we have to try your best to end.
Okay,
right.
just 1 minute, just 1 minute
right.
on this. Design authoring mandatory, joint production mandatory. Now, the BIM model itself, it is not mandate. I mean, it is not contractual at the moment. The very last minute I want to show you, it is this scary statement here. So the BIM model is part of tendering. BIM model contractually binding. So this is my last word I want to show you. So the development of BIM, it will be contractually binding, which is again has a huge implication to the whole industry for every stakeholder. It's no longer just a BIM model for you to look at, but it will be part of the contract later on. All right. So There's a lot of stuff happening in the policy, and then that definitely 1 hour is not enough. I'm sorry to overrun a little bit. All right.
Never mind.
Okay.
It's my fault. I should schedule it for 90 minutes.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
now,
really thanks for your information. I didn't aware that the technical circular has been launched since this year. So it's really changed the industry, as you said, that there is a lot of mandatory in the policy as well. So let's see, let's focus on the Q&A right now.
yes.
So we have 2 questions in the Q&A. The first one is asking by one of the attendees. Would you briefly comment or compare the adoption of BIM in Hong Kong and other countries? How advanced one behind are we?
How advanced are we? Not very advanced. Not very advanced, unfortunately. All right. Now, just a simple search. Okay, say okay, BIM adoption. All right. Now, I used to teach in university as well. Now, look at the graphics. All right, just the graphic here. Now, all these world map, all these different color graphics, there's an adoption of BIM. If you really look at that, so all these, they are mandatory items around the world. They can be dated back as early as 2006, started in America. All right, so we mandated in 2018. It's already 12 years behind the very first country in the world, right? So it's quite the BIM mandatory is a worldwide action. Singapore mandatory 2012. China is 90% of the projects in BIM. So it's quite in terms of Hong Kong. I mean, Hong Kong has a long history in using BIM, but in terms of deep BIM mandatory BIM adoption in a policy level, it's only started in 2018. All right, so it's quite lagging behind, I would say. All right.
Yeah. All right. So next question is by Vincent. What is the cost implication for a construction contractor to provide as-built BIM model compared with the traditional as-built documentation at the end of a project?
Well, this is a very tricky question. It's actually to be blunt. It is quite demanding, and as a matter of fact, most of the contract didn't realize the amount of work in this as well. Now, as I just show you in the ASC standard, in the EMSC standard, right? Look at the amount of information that need to be put into the BIM model. It is significant. It's phenomenal. So it does require the contractor to actually input all this information. Now, again, I don't have time to go through all these details, but there are different ways. There are smarter ways, or there's not so much smarter ways to handle this. So in terms of the cost, now the thing is, BIM comes with a cost. Definitely come with a cost. Now, one of the reasons why the Hong Kong adoption has been so slow, it is related to cost, because contractors don't realize the amount of work that involved. They in early days they put zero money, zero cost to adopt the BIM, and then when they actually get it, they find that themselves get into trouble, because the amount of time, the amount of effort, and the amount of cost that go into the BIM there's certain amount of implication. Now, to put into figures, so there are some studies, some surveys. Now, the amount of the BIM can be as much as 1% of construction cost. Now, in some countries, can be 1%. Now, it's quite significant in 1%. Imagine the construction cost is a certain amount in 1%. Now, in Hong Kong, we are talking about 0.1. Some years 0.005. Such a minimal cost, I would say. Okay, so the amount of money put into the BIM is significantly less, because the whole industry is not really realizing the amount of input into it. But if you step back and we think of why should we pump in this amount of cost in here, it is because the benefit that we can see all these issues, we can actually see the problem beforehand. So it's actually the whole process is actually get benefit from the process there. So from collectively, the whole process, the whole BIM process, actually saving the client money and saving a lot of money in the operation phase. Now, however, you need to start off the BIM process. You need to have money to put it to make it kick off first before you can reap the benefit. All right. So now, unfortunately, with the current design input, you have the construction input. We need to input our effort in the earlier phase before we can reap the benefit. Okay. Now that's always been misunderstood by the industry, and then they thought it is zero cost and BIM is just something it's not like that.
Everything is investment.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Just investment at the front side. Yeah.
Yes.
So Joy is asking you another question. Is it only for government project?
Definitely not. Definitely not. I just covered it. Okay, capital works, all the money from the government. Yes. Now the it covers the government work and this what do you call it, entrustment work. That means the MTR, the airport authority, URA, urban renewal, hospital authority, housing. It's all included. Now. Yeah. Even when we say 30 million, which is in terms of construction cost, which is a very small amount, 30 million. So if you do a park, or you do a small thing, even a public toilet, well, by definition, you need to use BIM. Now, for the private sector, it is not mandatory at the moment. Okay, it's just mentioned in the standard, it is any part in the private development that need to be handed back for the government for maintenance, that is subject to this policy. All right. But from the developer point of view, right? If you name the big developers in Hong Kong, Sino and Henderson and Sun Hung Kai. Now, those developers, they have BIM projects. Okay, it's voluntary. They have BIM projects, not 100%, of course, but they do have BIM department. They do have BIM projects. So we receive the tender, we receive the demand, the design and construction use BIM for them as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Mr. Wang would like to know, where can we get those documents you showed?
Oh, okay. It's simple. I've shown. Okay, this one here, Development Bureau. You just find. You just type Development Bureau Technical Circular, and then you can find that from their website. Yeah. And also all the standard, and you just type CIC BIM resources. Okay, it's a BIM resource publication in the CIC web page. You have all the standards. You got a lot of them. You can download all. They're all public information. Yeah, okay, the one I just showed you is here. This is the most important one. And actually, I was the author of this one here. Okay, I wrote this together with a UK consultant. Okay, so yeah, I wrote this. All right. So,
yeah, you contribute a lot.
So
yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
quite
well, we have to finalize the question. Two more here. It's talking about is it required using BIM for tendering? I think it really depends on the tender specification, especially for private sector's project. The last one is talking, many MEP consultants are still using CAD model for MEP drawing.
Yes.
Well, yes, I know.
Yes.
But I think the world is changing right now, especially it's talking about mandatory requirement for the government project. It takes lease, and then definitely the private project will come along with it. Yeah. So yes, I think because the time is not sufficient to answer all the questions. Well, I will pass the question to David. If you leave your email behind, you can when you register, you can see my email. If you have any question, you can ask. You wish to David give you an answer, please feel free to send me. I will pass it to David and then send it back to you. Okay.
Yep.
So thanks for your time, David.
Thank you. Sorry for a bit overrun.
No. Next time I will schedule better. I will give you 90 minutes. All right. Okay. Bye, everyone. Have a good evening. Okay. Bye.
Bye.